The boarding craft shuddered like it had been punched by a god. Lieutenant Elias Ward felt the vibration in his teeth before he heard the alarm. The sound was not a clean siren. It was a jagged howl that crawled through the metal walls, warning them that the Virelian command spire was awake and angry. "Impact in 10 seconds," someone shouted over the comm. Elias tightened the strap across his chest and forced his breathing to slow. He was not the biggest soldier on the team. He was not the most fearless. He had been a medic first, long before he learned to kick down doors and fire in zero gravity. But he had trained with the same focus as the others, because humanity did not get second chances against the conquered. Across from him, Sergeant Halden checked the team's magnets and tethers one last time. Behind the visor of his helmet, Halden's eyes looked calm in a way Elias never managed. Halden tapped Elias' shoulder, then pointed toward the medical kit clipped to Elias' thigh like a reminder, "Do your job, stay alive." Elias nodded. His mouth was dry, but his hands were steady. The craft lurched again. The screen above the hatch flashed a warning in red, "Enemy spore turrets tracking." The Virelians did not build ships like humans did. Their stations were half-grown, half-built, with living walls and organic circuits that pulsed like veins. To board one was to step inside something that wanted you dead. The clamp engaged. Metal kissed alien hull. "Go!" Halden roared. The hatch blew outward, and darkness opened like a mouth. Elias followed the others, boots locking onto the station's outer skin. His suit's lights painted the surface in harsh white. Up close, the command spire looked like bone and glass mixed together, ridges crossing in patterns that made his eyes itch. It was beautiful in a cold, wrong way. They moved fast. The team's cutter sliced a hole and they dropped inside. At first, it was quiet. Then the station screamed. The inner corridor was a ribbed tunnel, slick and warm. Elias hated how alive it felt. His visor fogged at the edges from the humid air. Their boots clacked against hardened resin plates that were too smooth to be comfortable. "Objective is central relay," Halden said. "Plant the charge, get out." Simple words, a simple mission, but nothing stayed simple once you were inside a Virelian structure. They pushed forward, weapons up. Elias stayed slightly behind the point, watching angles and listening to breathing. His role was to keep the team moving when someone went down. The thought of it sat heavy in his gut. A shape flickered above them, clinging to the ceiling. Elias raised his rifle, but Halden shot first. The creature dropped, twitching, green fluid spraying in thin arcs. The smell hit Elias even through filters, sharp like crushed leaves mixed with metal. "Contact," Halden warned. More came, drones, thin-limbed and fast. Not soldiers exactly, more like living tools shaped into killers. Their eyes reflected the team's lights in pale flashes. The corridor became noise. Gunfire thumped in tight bursts. Elias' suit shook with recoil as he fired when he had a clean shot. A drone leaped, and Halden caught it midair with a blast that turned it into drifting pieces. They kept moving. The charge was packed in a case carried by Corporal Rios, who moved like a person born in cramped spaces. Rios was small, quick, and always smiling until bullets started flying. A sudden impact slammed Elias sideways. His tether snapped tight, saving him from a hard fall, but his shoulder screamed. He swung his rifle toward the source and saw a drone with a spitter organ swelling in its throat. It fired. A glob hit the wall near Elias, eating into it, steaming. Another glob streaked past his helmet, close enough that he felt heat. Halden dropped the drone. "Ward status." "Fine," Elias lied, rolling his shoulder. It burned, but it moved. They reached a junction where the corridor split in 3 directions. Strange symbols pulsed on the walls, shifting like living ink. Rios checked a device that tried to read the station's layout. "Maps are garbage," Rios muttered. "It's changing." That was the problem with fighting Virelians. Their structures could reroute themselves like an animal tightening its muscles. Halden chose the center path. Move. They advanced into a wider passage lined with growth pods, bulb-like sacs that trembled as the team passed. Elias tried not to look too hard. He had seen what grew in those. The first explosion came from behind them. Elias turned, heart jumping. The rear corridor collapsed inward as if the station had decided to swallow the path. Resin plates folded and locked, sealing the way they had come. A deep vibration ran through the floor. "Station S isolating us," Halden said, voice clipped. "Then we finish fast," Rios replied. They pushed into the next chamber and the world dropped. Gravity shifted without warning. Elia's stomach lurched as the floor became a wall. The team tethers snapped tight. Someone cursed. Lights spun. Elias clenched his jaw and forced his body to adapt. Mag boots, Halden snapped. Lock! Elias slammed the boot controls. The magnets grabbed a resin surface that now acted as down. His mind screamed that this was wrong, but training held. A door-like opening at the far end sealed shut, then reopened somewhere else. The station was playing with them. They ran anyway. Then something struck the chamber hard enough that the whole place quivered. A blast from outside, Elias realized. A ship's cannon. The battle around the spire was still raging, and the spire was taking hits. A crack split the wall near Elias, and hot air hissed out. Another strike came closer. The resin surface bulged and then snapped like a bruise bursting open. The chamber began to break apart. "Go, go!" Halden yelled. They sprinted toward the nearest opening. Elias felt the floor tremble under his feet, the structure failing in layers. Rios got through first. Halden followed. 2 others made it. Elias came last, covering their backs because the medic always ended up watching the rear. Another impact hit. The corridor behind Elias folded inward like a closing fist. A chunk of living wall tore free and slammed into his side. Pain flared through his ribs. He stumbled, boots scraping, hands grabbing for balance. His tether caught on a ridge. For one bad second, he was stuck. He cut the tether, heart hammering, and pushed forward, and the opening ahead sealed shut, not slowly. Instantly, a smooth plate slid over it, locking like a lid. "Halden!" Elias shouted into comms. "Door sealed," only static answered. Elias slapped the wall, looking for a seam. The resin felt warm under his glove, like skin. He struck it with the butt of his rifle. It did not crack. The station shivered again, and Elias realized he was alone. His suit display blinked a warning, signal lost. The spire's living matter was blocking comms and sensors. He could not even see the team's markers anymore. Elias forced himself to breathe. Panic would kill him faster than drones. He turned and began to move, choosing the corridor that was still open. The station's interior changed as he walked, muscles shifting, surfaces tightening. It felt like walking through a throat. He heard skittering. Elias raised his rifle and advanced carefully. The skittering faded. Maybe the drones were regrouping, maybe they were hunting. A second vibration rolled through the corridor, followed by a low groan that made his bones ache. Somewhere, something big was moving. Elias rounded a bend and stopped. The corridor widened into an inner hall unlike the others. The walls here were smoother, almost polished, with patterns that looked less like bone and more like carved stone. Soft light glowed from veins in the ceiling, pale blue and steady. The air smelled cleaner, less sharp. It felt important. Elias stepped forward. His boots made a quiet tap, and the sound echoed. That alone made him uneasy. The rest of the spire swallowed noise. This place carried it. At the center of the hall was an opening like an arch. Beyond it, a chamber spread out, wide and high. Elia's suit lights flicked across strange structures, pillars that were half-grown, half-sculpted. Hanging membranes drifted in the air like curtains, slow and graceful. This was not a military corridor. This was a private place. Elia's instincts screamed to turn back. But he had no path back, and the station behind him seemed to tighten as if it was guiding him forward. He stepped through the arch. The chamber was warm, like a sheltered nest. At one side was a pool of clear fluid. At another side, a raised platform curved like a throne, though Elias had never seen a throne made of living matter. The floor was soft under his boots, almost like thick leather. Then he saw movement near the base of the platform. Small, shaking. Elias lifted his rifle, then froze. It was not a drone. It was a child. At least, that was the closest human word for it. The being was taller than a human toddler, but still small compared to the adult Virelians Elias had fought. Its limbs were thinner, less armored. Its skin was pale, with faint iridescent patterns like oil on water. Where an adult drone's eyes were cold and blank, this one's eyes were wide and wet. The child's side was torn open, a deep wound leaking dark fluid. It pressed a trembling hand against it, but it could not stop the bleeding. Its breath came in short, painful bursts. Elias swallowed hard. His training told him what it was, not just any child. A Virelian royal offspring would be kept deep inside the command spire, protected. Hidden, he had walked into the heart of the enemy. The child tried to crawl backward, away from him. It made a thin sound, not a word, more like a frightened call. Elias lowered his rifle slowly. His mind flashed through options. He could finish the mission alone somehow. He could search for an exit. He could kill the child and cripple the conquered's future. He did not move. A memory hit him, sharp and unwanted. His younger sister on Earth, years ago, skinned knee in tears, holding her hand out for help. Elias remembered himself kneeling, wrapping a bandage, speaking softly, promising it would be okay. He had become a medic because of moments like that. Now the same moment had found him in the wrong place with the wrong child. The chamber shook and dust-like spores drifted from the ceiling. A distant boom rolled through the station again, another external strike. The child cried out a strangled sound. Its wound spurted darker fluid. It sagged, losing strength. Elias made a decision that did not feel like a decision. His body moved before his mind finished arguing. He stepped closer, hands open, rifle slung down. He spoke through his helmet's speaker in simple, calm words. "Easy, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The translator in his suit could not make sense of the sounds he heard from the child, but the tone was clear: fear, pain. Elias crouched a few meters away, giving space. He unclipped his medical kit. The child's eyes darted between Elias' hands and the kit. It trembled harder, trying to back away, but its legs slipped on the soft floor. Elias reached into the kit and pulled out a seal foam injector and a roll of flexible bandage material. Standard human field gear. It was designed for human blood and human skin. He did not know how it would react to alien biology, but if he did nothing, the child would die. "Stay with me," Elias said, more to himself than to the child. He inched closer, very slowly. The child's breathing became rapid. It lifted its uninjured arm in a weak defensive motion, claws half extended. Not a threat, just a scared instinct. Elias paused. I know. He took a risk. He removed one glove. Cold air bit his skin inside the suit's inner seal, but he needed touch to judge temperature and texture. He reached out, palm facing down, stopping short of contact. The child stared at his bare hand like it was something strange and dangerous. Another boom struck the spire. A section of ceiling cracked. Something heavy shifted above them. Elias looked up, saw the fracture spreading, and swore. He lunged forward, not at the child, but over it, placing his body between it and the falling debris. A slab of resin snapped loose and slammed down where Elias had been crouching. Dust and spores blasted into the air. Elias' suit absorbed the worst, but the impact rattled him. The child shrieked. Elias turned, eyes scanning the child's wound. It was worse now. The tear had widened, maybe from the shock, maybe from internal damage. He could not wait. "All right," he said, voice firm but gentle. "I'm going to help you." He slipped his gloved hand back on quickly, then moved in and wrapped one arm around the child's shoulders to keep it from thrashing. It fought weakly, claws scraping his armor. Elias felt the scratches, heard the squeal of metal, but he held steady, not tight like a captor. Tight like a person holding someone who might fall. He injected a small dose of pain reducer near the wound. He chose the mildest setting, unsure of alien tolerance. The child jerked, then sagged slightly as the pain eased. Elias sprayed seal foam into the torn tissue. The foam expanded, forming a temporary plug. Dark fluid slowed. The child's breathing steadied just a little. Elias layered the flexible bandage around the torso, careful not to crush the rib structures he could not understand. He tightened it enough to hold pressure, but not enough to restrict breathing. Outside, another boom. The whole chamber trembled. The pool of clear fluid rippled. A hanging membrane tore and drifted down like a falling veil. Elias looked around and realized the spire was failing. The battle had come too close. If the structure collapsed, the child would die even if the bleeding stopped. Elias made a second choice, just as automatic as the first. He lifted the child. It was heavier than he expected, but his armor assisted. He cradled it against his chest, one arm under its legs, the other supporting its back. The child went stiff in fear, then trembled, then slowly clung to him with weak fingers, as if some part of it understood that he was the only stable thing in the room. Elias adjusted his hold, trying to keep the bandage from shifting. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, I've got you." He backed toward the arch, scanning for threats. No drones yet, no guards. That was odd. If this was truly the heart of the spire, there should have been defenders everywhere. Unless they had all fled when the strikes began, or unless the spire itself had sealed the sanctum and left the child trapped. Elias stepped into the hall outside. The corridor beyond had changed. The path he came from was no longer open. Instead, a new passage had formed, sloping downward, lit by the same pale blue veins. It felt like the station was offering him a route or leading him deeper. Elias hesitated. The child made a low sound and pressed closer, its breath warm against his armor. Blood, alien blood, smeared across his chest plate. Elias' comms remained silent. He did not know if his team was alive. He did not know if escape was possible. He only knew that he was holding an injured child who would die without him. He stepped forward. A faint clicking echoed from behind. Elias spun. 3 Virelian guards emerged from a side opening, tall, armored, their bodies built for war. Their limbs were thicker than the drones, their heads crowned with rigid plates. Their weapons were not rifles, but grown cannons fused into their forearms. They froze when they saw him, not because he was human. Humans were not rare on battlefields anymore. They froze because of what he held. The child's eyes turned toward them. It made a weak call, and the guards stiffened like soldiers hearing a royal command. Their weapons raised. Elias took a slow step back, shielding the child with his body. "I'm not," he started, then stopped. The translator would not help. The guards did not need words to fear him. They needed only the image of a human carrying their heir. Elias tightened his grip, not in threat, but in protection. His rifle remained slung. He did not reach for it. One of the guards made a sharp sound. Another shifted, claws scraping the floor. Their weapons remained pointed. Elias' heart pounded, but he kept his posture steady. He had treated enemy soldiers before in prisoner exchanges. He had seen fear behind alien eyes. But this was different. This was something like rage held back by shock. The child moved, lifting its head slightly. Its gaze fixed on Elias' faceplate, then on the guards. It made another sound, softer now. The guards hesitated. Elias realized then the child was alive because of him, and they could see it. The bandage, the seal foam, the way the bleeding had slowed, the way the child clung to him instead of collapsing. He did not know if that would save him, but it was the only thing he had. The corridor trembled again, and somewhere above, something massive groaned as it cracked. Dust drifted down. The guard's attention flicked upward for half a second. Elias took that half second and moved, not running, not attacking, just stepping sideways toward a thicker support pillar, placing himself and the child behind partial cover. The guards snapped their focus back to him, weapons tracking. Then the air changed. It thickened like pressure building before a storm. A deep, resonant sound rolled through the corridor, not an alarm, not a roar, but a command that made the guards straighten as if pulled by strings. Elias felt his skin prickle inside his suit. From the darkness beyond the guards, something approached, slow and heavy. The floor seemed to respond to it, pulsing faintly in time with its steps. The guards lowered their heads. Elias' mouth went even drier. A figure emerged into the pale blue light. She was larger than any Virelian Elias had ever seen. Her armor was not the blunt plating of soldiers. It was ornate, layered, grown into shapes that suggested authority and age. Her head crest rose high, and along her spine ran ridges that looked like a crown carved from living stone. Her eyes were not blank like drones. They were focused, ancient, and painfully intelligent. The Queen. She stepped closer, and the corridor seemed to quiet around her. Even the distant battle sounds felt muted, as if the spire itself held its breath. Elias did not move. In his arms, the wounded daughter lifted her face toward the Queen and made a sound that was half relief, half pain. The Queen's gaze snapped to the child. For the first time, something flickered in her expression, something sharp and raw. Then her eyes shifted to Elias, to the human holding her heir, bandaged and bleeding, refusing to let go. The guards tensed, waiting for the Queen's signal to tear him apart. Elias felt time slow. He could hear his own breathing, loud in his helmet. He could feel the child's heartbeat against his armor, fast and fragile. He took one careful step forward, not toward the Queen, but into the open, so she could see the bandages clearly, so she could see the seal foam, so she could see that he had not harmed the child. Elias lowered his head slightly, not as a bow, but as a gesture of calm. The Queen stared at him, unmoving. And then, in a moment that made the entire corridor feel unreal, the alien Queen did not strike. She froze. The corridor remained silent after the Queen stopped. No weapon fired. No command was given. The guards stayed frozen, their bodies tense, waiting for an order that did not come. Even the living walls of the command spire seemed to slow their movement, as if the station itself was unsure what to do. Elias stood still, every muscle tight. His arms ached from holding the child, but he did not shift his grip. The child's body was warm against his chest, its breathing shallow but steady. Each breath felt like a promise he was afraid to break. The queen stepped closer. Each step was measured, careful. Her presence filled the space without effort. Ilias had faced enemy commanders before, but this was different. This was not just power. This was something ancient, something shaped by centuries of control. Her eyes did not leave the child. The guards moved slightly, spreading out, creating a loose half-circle around Ilias and the queen. Their weapons were still aimed, but their fingers did not tighten. The queen stopped only a few steps away. Ilias felt the urge to speak, to explain, to beg if he had to. But he remembered something from his medic training. When someone is in shock, words can make things worse. Calm actions mattered more, so he stayed quiet. The child shifted in his arms and made a weak sound. Its claws tightened briefly on Ilia's armor, then relaxed. The pain reducer was still working, but the wound was serious. Ilias knew the seal foam was only buying time. The queen lowered herself slowly, bending one of her long limbs until she was closer to the child's level. This movement alone caused a ripple of tension among the guards. Queens did not lower themselves. Queens were always above. She extended one slender, armored finger toward the bandage, stopping just short of touching it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying the material, the way it held the wound closed. She made a low sound, deep and controlled. Ilia's suit translator hesitated, then tried to assemble meaning. "Unknown compound," it said in a flat tone. "Foreign method." The queen's gaze lifted to Ilia's faceplate. Her voice came again, clearer this time. The translator struggled, then spoke. "You altered her." Ilias swallowed. He shifted his weight carefully so the child stayed supported. "She was bleeding," he said simply. "She would have died." The guards reacted instantly. One of them made a sharp clicking noise, a sign of anger or challenge. Another adjusted their stance, weapon lifting higher. The queen did not look at them. "She is of the crown," the queen said. "No foreign hand is permitted." Ilias nodded once. "I didn't know who she was, I only saw someone hurt." The queen stared at him for a long moment. Ilias could not read her expression the way he could read humans, but something about her stillness made his chest tight. "She is alive," the queen said slowly. "Yes," Ilias replied, "for now." That honesty surprised even him. The child stirred again, lifting its head weakly. Its eyes moved between Ilias and the queen. When it saw the queen, it made a soft, broken sound and reached out one small hand. Ilias adjusted his grip so the child could stretch its arm without losing support. The queen froze again, but this time it was different. Her body did not tense. Instead, her posture softened just slightly. She extended her hand and allowed the child's claws to curl around one of her fingers. The contact lasted only a second, but it changed the air in the corridor. The queen closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were no longer focused only on the child. They looked at Ilias. "You should not exist here," she said. Ilias nodded. "I know. You are an enemy. Yes, you carry a weapon. Yes, you hold my daughter." Ilias tightened his arms protectively without realizing it. She needed help. The queen rose to her full height again. She turned her head slightly, and the guards straightened even more, ready for command. For a terrifying second, Ilias thought this was it, that the queen had only needed to see her daughter alive before ordering his death. Instead, she said, "Lower your weapon." Ilias slowly reached back and unclipped his rifle, letting it hang by its sling. He did not drop it. Sudden movements could be misread, but he made it clear he would not use it. The queen watched closely, then nodded once. "You will follow," she said. Ilias blinked. "Follow where?" "To healing chambers," the queen replied. "If your methods have delayed death, they will be examined." The guards shifted, opening a path. Ilias hesitated. "If I set her down, she could." "You will not," the queen said, cutting him off. "You will carry her. You have proven stability." The word felt strange coming through the translator, but Ilias understood the meaning. He nodded. "Okay." The queen turned and began moving down the corridor, deeper into the spire. The guards fell in around Ilias, close but not touching. Their weapons were lowered now, though still ready. As they walked, the station changed again. The living walls smoothed, the path widening, becoming more symmetrical. Lights brightened. The air grew cooler and cleaner. Ilia's arms burned, but adrenaline kept him moving. The child's breathing grew a little more even, but its skin felt warmer. Infection, maybe, or shock. He spoke softly, more out of habit than expectation. "Stay with me, almost there." The child did not understand the words, but it seemed to understand the tone. Its grip tightened briefly, then relaxed again. They entered a large chamber filled with strange structures that reminded Elias of medical equipment, but grown instead of built. Curved platforms lined the walls. Thin, flexible limbs hung from the ceiling, each tipped with delicate tools. The air hummed faintly. The queen stopped beside one platform. "Place her here," she said. Elias stepped forward but did not immediately release the child. "She needs support when you move her," he said carefully. "Her wound is sealed, but it's fragile." The queen studied him for a long second, then made a gesture. The hanging limbs shifted, rearranging themselves, forming a cradle-like structure. Elias lowered the child slowly, guiding her into the support. The moment he released his grip, the child let out a small, panicked sound and reached for him. Elias hesitated, then gently held one of her hands until she settled. The queen watched this closely. The medical limbs moved in, scanning the wound. They emitted soft pulses of light and sound. Dark fluid was drawn away. The seal foam was examined, then partially removed and replaced with something that shimmered faintly. Elias stepped back as instructed, but he did not turn away. The queen moved to stand beside him. "You chose her over your mission," she said. Elias shrugged slightly. "I couldn't leave her." "Your species places value on non-kin," the queen said, "even enemies." Elias considered that. "We try to." The queen looked at him again, longer this time. "That choice endangered you." "Yes." "Why?" Elias thought of his sister, of training halls, of med school lessons, of wounded soldiers screaming in languages he barely understood. "Because someone had to," he said simply. The queen was silent. The medical process continued. The child's breathing deepened. Color slowly returned to her skin. One of the limbs injected a clear fluid and the child relaxed fully, slipping into unconsciousness. Elias felt tension drain from his shoulders. He had not realized how tightly he had been holding himself together. "She will live," the queen said at last. Elias exhaled. "Good." The queen turned toward him fully now. Up close, Elias could see fine details in her armor and skin, small scars, patterns that spoke of age and survival. This was not a being who ruled by accident. "You are aware," she said, "that your presence here cannot be ignored." "I figured," Elias replied. "You are an enemy combatant," she continued. "By law, you should be destroyed." Elias nodded. "I understand." "But you preserved the future of the crown," the queen said. "That cannot be ignored either." One of the guards shifted, uneasy. The queen raised a hand slightly, and the guard stilled. "You will not be executed," she said. Elias blinked. "I woe." "No." A strange wave of relief washed over him, followed immediately by caution. "Then what happens to me?" "You will be held," the queen said. "Observed." Studied, that sounded less comforting. "You will not be harmed," she added, "unless you force it." Elias nodded. "Fair enough." The queen looked back at her daughter, then back at Elias. "You touched what is sacred," she said, "and yet you did not take." "I just helped," Elias said quietly. "That distinction matters," the queen replied. She turned to the guards. "Escort him, no restraints." The guards hesitated. "No restraints," the queen repeated, her voice harder now. They obeyed. Elias was guided out of the chamber and into a side corridor. As they walked, he felt the weight of exhaustion crash down on him. Now that the immediate danger had passed, his body reminded him of every bruise and strain. They placed him in a small, smooth-walled chamber. The door sealed behind him, but it did not feel like a cell. There were no restraints, no weapons pointed at him, just quiet. Elias leaned back against the wall and slid down until he was sitting. His hands shook now that he was no longer holding the child. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He had no idea what would happen next. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange inside the spire. Finally, the wall across from him shifted and opened. The queen entered alone. She studied him for a moment, then spoke. "My daughter asked for you." Elias looked up sharply. "She's awake." "Yes," the queen said, "and she remembers." Elias swallowed. "Remembers what?" The queen's eyes held his. "That you did not let go." Something heavy settled in Elias' chest. He nodded once, unsure what to say. The queen turned slightly, as if considering something that went far beyond this room. "Your species has been judged incomplete," she said. "Emotion-driven, inefficient." Elias almost smiled, almost. "But today," the queen continued, "you acted without calculation, without gain. And yet the outcome altered more than one life." She stepped closer. "The war will continue," she said, "but its shape may change." Elias looked up at her, hope and fear tangled together. The queen met his gaze. And you, she said, will be remembered. The war did not stop just because one life was saved. Far from the Virelian command spire, human space burned. News traveled fast, even through damaged relays and broken channels. Fleets clashed near border systems. Trade routes collapsed. Colonies went dark one by one, either evacuated or destroyed. Humanity fought with everything it had, but everyone knew the truth. Alone, they could not win a long war. On Earth, leaders argued in underground chambers while alarms echoed above them. Generals demanded more ships. Scientists begged for time they did not have. Civilians watched the sky and waited for messages that often never came. And in the middle of all that chaos, one strange story began to spread. A human medic had been captured inside a Virelian command spire. Not just captured, spared. At first, no one believed it. Virelians did not take prisoners. They erased enemies. That had been proven again and again. But reports from battlefield sensors showed something impossible. A human boarding team wiped out, except for one signal that vanished instead of going dark. Lieutenant Elias Ward. The name meant nothing at first, just another soldier. Then fragments leaked through neutral channels, alien whispers, unofficial signals, a single repeated phrase that translators struggled to understand. The one who held. Human intelligence agencies took notice. On the Virelian side, the reaction was even more dangerous. The Queen's decision not to kill Elias did not go unnoticed. Among the Concord's ruling circles, unease spread like a quiet infection. Queens were not supposed to hesitate. Queens were not supposed to change outcomes based on emotion. Older minds began to question. Younger commanders grew restless, and beyond the Concord, other powers were watching. The Trellic Combine, a machine logic civilization, calculated probabilities and found a weakness. The Atrax Dominion, a species that ruled through fear and ritual dominance, saw opportunity. Smaller empires, long crushed under Virelian expansion, smelled blood in the void. A message began to pass between them. If the Virelians could hesitate, they could fall. The strike came without warning. A coalition fleet emerged from folded space near a Virelian-controlled system, tearing through defenses with numbers the Conquered had not expected. Automated weapons, biological warforms, and gravity distorters flooded the battlefield. Virelian fleets responded quickly, but for the first time in generations, they were pushed back. The Queen felt at the moment the first system fell. She stood within her inner chamber, surrounded by quiet, while tactical data streamed across living surfaces. Losses mounted. Not catastrophic, but dangerous. The pattern was wrong. "They test us," one of her advisors said. "They believe you weakened us." The Queen's eyes flicked briefly toward a nearby chamber where her daughter rested under constant care. "No," the Queen replied. "They believe we hesitate. That belief spreads," the advisor warned. "It invites predators." The Queen was silent. Elsewhere in the spire, Elias felt the change before he understood it. The guards escorting him moved faster now. Their posture was tighter. The station itself seemed more alert, corridors shifting with purpose instead of confusion. Elias had been allowed limited movement under supervision. He had seen the child again, briefly, enough to know she was healing. She had not spoken in words he understood, but she had reached for him, and that had been enough. Now he was guided back into the Queen's presence. She did not waste time. "The galaxy moves," she said, "and it moves against us." Elias stood straight, hands relaxed at his sides. "You're under attack." "Yes, and humans." The Queen paused for a fraction of a second. "Also," that hit harder than Elias expected. "Our defenses are failing," the Queen continued. "Not everywhere, but enough." Elias frowned. "Then why am I still alive?" The Queen studied him carefully. "Because you represent something my enemies do not understand." Elias shook his head slightly. "I'm just one person." "No," the Queen said. "You are proof." She gestured, and the chamber wall shifted, showing an image of space. Human ships fought in desperate formations, smaller and weaker, yet refusing to break. Civilian vessels shielded by military hulls. Retreats that turned into counterattacks through sheer stubborn timing. "They fight as if loss is unacceptable," the Queen said. "Even when it is inevitable." "That's kind of our thing," Elias said quietly. The Queen turned toward him. "My enemies believe you are weak because you feel, because you hesitate to destroy." Elias met her gaze. "They're wrong." "Yes," the Queen agreed. "They are." She stepped closer. "My kind has ruled through efficiency," she said. "Through survival of structure, not individuals, we sacrifice parts to save the whole. And now," Elias asked. And now, she replied, I have seen the cost of that thinking. She did not say her daughter's name, but she did not need to. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as distant impacts shook the spire. Reports streamed faster now. The coalition advances, an advisor's voice echoed. They will reach the inner sectors within cycles. The queen raised a hand, silencing the voice. Then she looked back at Elias. You choose to protect even when logic advises retreat, she said. That choice confuses my enemies. Elias took a slow breath. What are you asking? The queen did not answer immediately. Instead, she extended one limb and touched the living wall. The image changed. It showed a Virelian fleet entering a human system, not attacking, defending. Elias' breath caught. That's a possibility, the queen said. Nothing more yet. You'd help us, Elias asked. The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. I would prevent extinction, yours and mine. Elias felt something twist in his chest. People back home won't trust this. They do not need to trust, the queen replied. They need time. She turned away, considering vast distances and deeper consequences. My enemies believe humans will break, she said. They believe compassion is weakness. She turned back sharply. I intend to show them the cost of that belief. The first joint engagement happened near a dying red star. Human ships were already losing when Virelian warforms emerged from folded space. Coalition fleets hesitated, sensors struggling to understand what they were seeing. Virelian weapons did not target human vessels. They targeted the attackers. The shock rippled across every channel in the system. Coalition commanders shouted in confusion. Some accused the Virelians of deception. Others ordered immediate retreat. Human pilots could hardly believe it. A battered human destroyer limped behind a Virelian cruiser, its hull torn and leaking atmosphere. Instead of finishing it, the cruiser adjusted its shield pattern, extending partial cover. The message that followed was short and untranslated. Hold! Human fleets held. Together, they pushed back the coalition forces with brutal efficiency and stubborn coordination. The attackers had expected hesitation, mistrust, delay. They got none. News spread faster than fear ever had. The Virelians had chosen a side. Across the galaxy, calculations shifted. Treaties were reconsidered. Neutral systems closed their gates. Some powers withdrew entirely, unwilling to face an alliance built not on convenience but on shared survival. On Earth, the reaction was chaos. Some celebrated. Some panicked. Some refused to believe it at all. When Elia's name finally reached public channels, it spread like wildfire, not as a hero at first, as a question. Why would an enemy empire risk everything for one human? Inside the command spire, Elias watched fragments of the war through controlled displays. He felt distant from it all, like he had stepped out of his own life and into someone else's story. The queen allowed him access he did not expect. She did not speak often, but when she did, she listened. You altered outcomes without intent, she said once. Elias shrugged. I just did what I thought was right. That is what makes it dangerous, the queen replied. Her daughter healed faster than predicted. She grew stronger each cycle. When Elias was allowed to see her again, she walked instead of being carried. She studied him with open curiosity, not fear. She reached for his hand. The queen watched closely. You have bonded, the queen said. I didn't mean to, Elias replied. Intent is irrelevant, the queen said. Outcome matters. As the war dragged on, the coalition fractured. Mistrust spread among its members. They had not planned for unity between such different species. They had not planned for humans to refuse collapse. On a distant battlefield, a human colony was nearly overrun. Evacuation was incomplete. Civilians were trapped. A Virelian commander requested guidance. Human losses will be high if we withdraw, the commander warned. Tactically inefficient to hold. The queen's response was immediate. Hold, she said. The colony survived. That decision echoed through the conquered. Some praised it. Others whispered dissent. Ancient minds debated whether the queen had gone too far. The queen did not waver. She taught me something, her daughter said one cycle, sitting beside her. Her voice was still soft, still learning. Taught you what? The queen asked. The child looked toward the chamber where Elias was waiting, visible through a transparent membrane. That strength is not only in ending threats, the child said. Sometimes it is in refusing to. The queen closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, a message was already forming, one that would be broadcast across controlled space. Humanity is under our protection. The reaction was explosive. Some conquered systems resisted, others obeyed without question. The coalition, hearing the declaration, finally broke apart entirely. No one wanted to test an alliance built on fury and loyalty. Elias stood in the Queen's chamber as the final words were transmitted. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. The Queen looked at him. "No, you did." Elias shook his head. "I didn't plan this." "That is why it works," the Queen replied. Outside, the stars burned on, indifferent as ever. But something fundamental had shifted among those who lived beneath them. For the first time in a long time, humanity was not standing alone, and the galaxy was beginning to understand something it had never truly grasped before. Humans did not fight because they loved war. They fought because they refused to let go. The war did not end with a single message, but it slowed. Across human space, alarms still sounded, ships still burned, and names were still carved into walls of memory. Yet something had changed in the way battles unfolded. Human fleets no longer fought with the quiet fear of being alone. Somewhere, just beyond sensor range, Virelian warforms moved like silent guardians. The coalition that had tried to erase both species fractured completely. Old allies turned on each other. Some retreated to their home systems and sealed their borders. Others sent desperate envoys, trying to explain decisions that could no longer be undone. Humanity survived the final months of the war not because it suddenly became stronger, but because it was no longer isolated. On Earth, people watched the sky with a new kind of disbelief. Virelian ships hung in high orbit, massive and unmistakably alien, their organic hulls glowing faintly against the dark. They did not fire. They did not land troops. They simply stayed, protecting. In the Virelian command spire, Elias Ward stood at a wide opening that overlooked the stars. He had been there many times now, yet the view still felt unreal. This place had once been the heart of an enemy empire. Now it felt quiet. He was no longer a prisoner. He was not exactly free either. He was something in between, a guest no one knew how to categorize. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. He did not turn. He already knew who it was. The Queen stopped beside him, her presence familiar now, though never less imposing. Her daughter walked a short distance behind her, steady on her feet, her movements confident. The child's wound was gone. Only a faint pattern remained, a mark that would fade with time. "She wanted to see the stars with you," the Queen said. Elias glanced back and offered a small smile. "I'm honored." The child stepped forward and stood beside him, copying the way he rested his arms on the edge. Her eyes followed distant ships moving like slow sparks. "Do they still fight?" she asked, her voice clearer now, more assured. "Some do," Elias replied gently, "but fewer every day." She considered that. "Why?" "Because fighting is expensive," Elias said, "not just in ships." The Queen watched him closely. "Your people measure cost differently." "We try to," Elias said. "We don't always succeed." Silence settled again, comfortable this time. The Queen broke it. "The conquered has changed," she said. "Not all accept it." Elias nodded. "Same with humans." "Some of my kind believe I acted out of weakness," the Queen continued. "They believe protecting your species endangers our future." "And what do you believe?" Elias asked. The Queen looked toward her daughter. "I believe extinction is a poor teacher," she said. "And survival without meaning is hollow." That was as close to philosophy as Elias had ever heard from her. "You'll have dissent," Elias said, "maybe even rebellion." "Yes," the Queen agreed, "but that was always inevitable. Stability that cannot withstand challenge is not true stability." The child looked up at her mother. "Will they hurt him?" she asked softly. The Queen's gaze sharpened. "No," Elias felt his chest tighten slightly. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You already have," the Queen said, not unkindly. "And it was necessary." Across the galaxy, historians would later argue over when the war truly ended. Some marked the final coalition retreat. Others marked the first joint human, Virelian defense pact. A few marked something much smaller, the moment an enemy chose not to kill. Elia's return to human space was not quiet. The shuttle that carried him crossed into Earth-controlled orbit under Virelian escort. Human defense platforms tracked it nervously, weapons ready but not firing. Messages flooded every channel. When Elias stepped onto Earth soil, he was met by soldiers, medics, and officials who did not quite know whether to salute him or question him. He was taken underground, debriefed for hours, then days. Every word he spoke was recorded, every action examined. They asked him why he did it. Over and over again, he always gave the same answer. "She was hurt." Some people were angry. They said he risked humanity for an alien. Others said he saved humanity by accident. Most did not know what to think. Elias did not argue. He returned to civilian life quietly, refusing offers of fame, refusing interviews. He went back to medicine, to treating burns and broken bones, to listening more than speaking. But the galaxy did not forget him. Among the Virelians, a new saying spread, first whispered, then taught. Do not harm the young where a human can see. It was not a threat. It was a warning. The queen's daughter grew. She learned of her people's history, of conquest and survival, of the long logic that had shaped the conquered. But she also learned something new. She learned stories of humans, of soldiers who carried civilians through fire, of medics who stayed behind, of entire worlds that refused surrender even when hope was gone. She remembered warm arms and steady breathing. She remembered not being alone. When she was older, she asked her mother a question that echoed through the halls of power. Why did you trust him? The queen answered without hesitation. Because he did not see you as power, she said. He saw you as someone worth saving. Years passed. The alliance between humanity and the Virelian conquered settled into something cautious but real. Trade routes reopened under shared protection. Scientific exchanges began, slow and careful. There were still clashes, still misunderstandings, but no return to total war. Other species watched from a distance. They adjusted their strategies, not because humans were the strongest, but because humans were unpredictable in a way that did not fit old models. They would sacrifice advantage for strangers. They would fight hopeless battles to buy time. They would not let go. Elias aged quietly. One day, long after the war, he was invited back to the command spire. His hair was streaked with gray now. His steps were slower. The queen was older too. Her movements were more deliberate, her presence no less powerful. Her daughter stood beside her, taller now, poised and confident, her eyes bright with understanding. You are remembered, the queen told Elias, across many systems. Elias smiled faintly. I never wanted that. That is why it endures, the queen replied. The daughter stepped forward and placed one hand over her chest, mimicking an old human gesture she had learned. You held me, she said simply. Elias felt his throat tighten. I did. You did not let go, she continued. No, Elias said. I didn't. They stood together for a moment, human and alien, mother and daughter, survivor and protector. Outside the spire, stars burned and faded, empires rose and fell, and stories were told in 1,000 languages. And among them all, one truth spread quietly, carried from world to world. Humanity was not feared because it destroyed worlds. Humanity was feared because when it chose to protect something, it never let go.